Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another special meeting of the Norwich Select Board. This is Tuesday, December 6th, 2022. My name is Marcia Calloway. I'm currently serving as chair. I'm joined in alphabetical order by board members Roger Arnold, Robert Geer, Mary Layton, and Aaron Lamperti. Pursuant to Act 78, this meeting is being held fully remotely with Zoom access technology, which permits attendance of the public by Zoom and by telephone. The board has posted and included in the meeting agenda the information that enables direct access and participation. The agenda and packet materials were distributed by the Norwich listserv and are available on the town website under the Select Board tab. For those people dialing in by telephone, you can press *9 to raise your hand and *6 when you're recognized by the chair to speak. Again, thank you very much to Mary Layton, who's once again taking the minutes of the meeting while fully participating. And thanks again to Rob Geer for ably taking charge of the Zoom. The first item on the agenda is agenda review. And I would note that we have a couple of items that are not yet ripe for this meeting. So I would propose that we remove item number 6, the interim town manager update. That's being postponed until tomorrow's special meeting. And item number 10, the inspection of the trail at Marion Cross School. That isn't ready yet to be heard. Is there any other concern about the agenda? And if not, may I have a motion, and may I simultaneously apologize for no motion sheet because today was a very bad day.
Go ahead. So I move to approve the agenda with the removal of agenda item 6 and 10.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mary. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Approval of the draft meeting minutes from 11/22 and 11/29/2022. It may say, there may be a typo on there. Does it say, yeah, it says 1/29/22. So that should be amended to 11/29/22. And also the correspondence that's in the packet. Does anyone have any comments, want to pull any correspondence, etc.?
I noticed some correction for the minutes. So for November 22nd, I think the motion that we did finally make around the composition of the reappraisal committee, I think, Mary, I think you had actually voted no, but you said it was unanimous.
Okay, so just correct the vote.
So I would correct that vote. And then otherwise, I mean, I think that was it. I noticed on another set of minutes, we didn't have who voted to enter into public session for 11/29. But I'm happy to, and I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to look that up so I could actually make the correction for right now. So I guess unless people know who voted to enter public session on the 29th, perhaps we table the minutes until we can make that correction, which is to say, thank you, Mary, for taking these minutes. But,
okay,
that's all.
And then to that, I'm just trying to see if I can see that. Does anyone else have it?
I mean, I don't think we're in the...
Okay.
I think, so I would just say, so here, in the interest of moving this along, I might move to table the approval for the November 29th meeting minutes to a future date. How about that?
Yeah. Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Rob seconds it. Any discussion? I can probably look at the CATV as well. We didn't have it that night, did we?
I'm happy to take this on. I just wanted to, I just didn't have time, just like probably all of you didn't have time.
I probably have it in my notes, but it's a housekeeping thing, so I think tabling it is good. But I think between us, we can straighten it out.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. I would just note, not for pulling, but just noting some of the correspondence. Arlene Rotman, that's good information that the Planning Commission should have about places to post for jobs. And then I would point out, I'm sure you've all read it, but the Norwich Local Emergency Management Plan is all set. Yes, Aaron?
Shall we vote on Roger's motion before we move on?
We're still in the consent agenda, and that's correspondence, I think. So that's why I'm not pulling it. I'm just bringing it up. So if you want to vote on it now, we can.
Oh, I don't know.
So I mean, I can take. So do you want me? I can table the motion, and then I can make a different motion for all of the consent agenda if you prefer that, Marcia.
No, it's fine. I was just pointing them out because I think it's nice to just say this is in there. And thank you to everybody who has done this. I'm not pulling anything. We've also got, that's not on the agenda tonight, reports from 2 of the departments in town. So can we have a vote on the agenda, on the consent agenda? We have.
I think Aaron was saying that we have a motion on the table, but how about I can pull my motion, or I can rescind my motion and make a different one if that helps.
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay, I'll rescind my motion, and so I move to approve the consent agenda, but also with the exception of the November 29th meeting minutes, draft meeting minutes. How's that?
That's good. And is there a second?
Sure, I'll second again.
Rob seconds again. All in favor? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you. Okay. So now I'm just going to note, which is also on the agenda for tonight, that we're trying a new format tonight in terms of the public participation. And essentially what we're trying to do is cluster the public participation in front of the different types of items. Some are going to be informational, some action items, some discussion items, but we invite the public to sort of speak to the issue that they're concerned about in that space. So we'll see if this works. It was suggested by John Carroll, and I think it has some merit, but we'll see if it works. So with that as a basis for the rest of this, informational items tonight, this is the space for important information that doesn't rise to the level of any select board action or any necessary discussion, but informational. So with that, I'm wondering if we can have an update on the townwide reappraisal panel. There is a memo in the packet from the listers and the whole panel, the reappraisal review panel. So is someone here from the panel to just speak to that if they want to? Otherwise, we'll just take it. Okay.
Cheryl.
Do I see anyone? I don't.
Cheryl.
Okay, I can't. I'm sorry. I have a contracted screen here. Cheryl Lindbergh.
Hi, Cheryl Lindbergh. So I would speak to it if the board has any questions. Obviously, Rob was on this panel as well and could certainly speak to the board about it if he chose. But, you know, I offer this opportunity to the select board to ask any, you know, more in-depth questions of the panel. I'd be happy to answer them, or Rob.
Board. Rob?
I have a question for Cheryl. Did we get updates with further clarification from the firm?
Further clarification, yes. Yes, the listers have been back in touch with them. They have not disagreed on any of the matters that we were, you know, asking them to include. For example, the sales study was, you know, agreeable. for the 3-year period. And, they're ready to, move forward with us. So is that answering what you're asking me? Is that?
Yeah.
We've been.
Thank you.
Yeah, for tomorrow night's meeting, there has been a draft of a contract pulled together for tomorrow night's meeting, which you'll get in your packet, that we reviewed with KRT as well. So there's nothing in that contract that they have any problems with. So when you look at that tomorrow night, you'll see the items, I think, Rob, that we talked about, and you'll see that they're supportive of doing us a really great job as a reappraisal at the town.
Thank you, Cheryl. Any other questions? And I should have asked, yes, Roger?
Did you have a thought you wanted to finish before I speak?
No, go ahead. I was just going to say I hadn't asked the public if they wanted to. But go ahead.
Well, I guess, so obviously there's an agenda item on this tomorrow. I guess I just wanted to provide a little context. From what I understand, the sole bid that we received to the RFP wasn't necessarily responsive in all of the ways that we had hoped, or wasn't responsive to the full criteria that we had hoped. And so, I think Rob's question, I believe, might be saying, well, given that this was a sole bid and we have a desire to reappraise, have they addressed in any way how they might be more responsive to the bid? And so I guess in thinking about tomorrow, where we have a draft contract before us and need to authorize reserve funds, I would just like to see some expression of that in a written form before I feel comfortable spending the public's money. So that's just the only thing I have left. That's the only thing I'm thinking about.
Yeah, that is why I asked about the clarification. There were just a couple of things that were unclear, and I thought we were going to get a memo, but we'll get it tomorrow, I guess.
Right.
Yes, go ahead, Cheryl.
So I think from the end of the panel's meeting, the request was to email them the bullets of the concerns, and that's what we did right after the meeting and sent it off to them. And the response was that they did not have any. They were fine with what we brought forward in those list of bullets. So
and that was expressed in writing.
Yeah. Would you like that, Roger, tomorrow night?
I think that would be helpful.
Yes,
but that would be great. That's that is in following the conversation that was, and in hearing your report with Rob, that is my last frontier.
Yeah. I don't know if it lends any help to the public and the select board to know that they have been selected to reappraise Putney, Vermont. That has been a recent commitment that they have. So
that's great, because that would be 2 firms that they are working in Vermont.
And one of the individuals that would be working on our reappraisal did work on the Hartford reappraisal in 2017 and was involved in all of the appraisals or assessments, I should use the word assessments, for the village of Queechee and related villages for Hartford. So was very close by doing some work.
Okay, and then so Marcia, just a follow-up question for you. So is your intention with this agenda item for us as a board to talk less?
No, this is just informational. I'm trying to cluster it so that, everybody has an expectation about what's going to be happening. So this is information. There will be something for a discussion tomorrow night about this, because then we'll have the contract. So, I'm trying to knock off stuff as I go forward and help people to prepare better for the future stuff as well. So you wanted a little more information. Cheryl can provide that. I think we can ask Miranda if she'll do an amendment to the packet tomorrow so that people can have it, and we'll go forward. And I guess I'm sure this is right, but you have to fill out the RA 308. I believe that's the form that you're filling out. And so I'm assuming that what's in the contract is going to be sufficient to go with that 308 and will satisfy our requirement to file by December 9th.
Right. That is the goal of the work that got done. It's very possible, Marcia, that we got Miranda the draft of the contract before she put out the packet. I didn't look at the next packet yet myself, but we got it to her earlier today, so maybe it's in there.
Okay, thank you. Aaron, you were first.
Yeah, I just glanced, and the draft contract is in the packet for tomorrow. I don't know if it has a deliverables section. I assume that's up to date and covers everything that you wanted it to cover, or that the RFP requested. That's the question, I think. If it's
right,
a separate memo isn't necessary if all of the points are covered in the draft contract, I think. Is that right? Would you agree, Roger?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And the only thing I will say to that point, if I may, building off of that, is we can't encumber contracts on behalf of the town of Norwich. So we will need a town manager to sign that contract. So to the extent that we are, so I imagine that, our conversation tomorrow might suggest to the agency that oversees this document that needs to be approved by December 9th, we will update them with our plans and our potential public actions, but we won't be able to sign any contract until we have that town manager. It's the town manager who manages and signs that contract.
Cheryl, do you have anything to add?
No, I think I think that you will see that the draft of the contract includes all the deliverables we've asked for, and it is clear. We can certainly be more specific if anybody has that concern to the contract. But the firm has agreed to the performance of the reappraisal as we have asked for it to be done in the RFP.
Good night, bye-bye. I love you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Cheryl.
Get your truck, yeah.
Right.
In your car.
Somebody's microphone is on.
Yeah, because I'm in the waiting room. I can't hear anything.
You're in now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, here we go. We're on to the next section, which is action items potentially for motions. So I'm just going to briefly go over what is in this section, and then if there's any public comment about it, we would hear that, and then we'll go through these in order, and the select board can discuss and take any. Cheryl? Are you waiting?
I think there were some others that wanted to talk about the reappraisal part. That's all. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see names.
3 hands.
3 hands?
Stuart was first.
With great apologies, I would call on Stuart Richards because that's the first one I see.
Stuart Richards, 82 Elm Street. No need to apologize. The technical aspects here can be very difficult, and I don't think that it's totally ironed out. But what I wanted to talk about, or at least express an opinion about, was the fact that this appraisal company was the sole appraisal company that filed a bid last year, and they were rejected. And this year, it's also the sole company that has offered a bid. Apparently, the market for appraisers is very difficult, and they're overwhelmed. But there's another fact that plays into this, is that the same company that we rejected last year, which we are forced to accept this year, is going to cost us, I'm not sure of the exact number, I think it's $25,000 more or $35,000 more. Had we accepted this particular appraisal company last year, we would have saved X number of dollars. And it raises some concerns that we did not act appropriately or expeditiously when we might have, could have, should have, in my opinion. So thanks very much. And perhaps in the future, we'll learn from the experience and do a little bit more, do what we need to do more expeditiously.
Thank you, Stuart. We all hope to learn. Neil Odell.
Just some correction, a correction for
Union Village Road. I just wanted to stress the importance of the timeline associated with the work necessary here to the select board.
Does anyone else have it?
The letter that we received
I can
from the state is going to require a response and filing of the Form RA 308 by
I was saying that we have a motion on the table, but how about I want to make sure that I can pull my motion.
Aware of the importance of that date. My reading
my motion and make a different one.
Says that if we fail to respond by that date, the state shall withhold education funds from the town,
the public participation,
which could potentially place the school district in a less than desirable position. As we try to continue to fund our schools. And so, as you consider this tomorrow night, I just want to make sure that all folks are aware that the timeline is crucially important to the school district, and that the proper paperwork be filed by the 9th.
Thank you, Neil. That's critical. Thank you very much. The next person up that I see is, it might be Linda Cook. Is that you? 847. Hello, Linda Cook, is that you? Telephone 847. Can you press *6 to unmute yourself?
Okay, here we go. Neil, correct me if I'm wrong, also lose part of our transportation funds.
Yeah, Roger has a clarification for clarifying the speech, I think.
I think Linda Cook was just answering a question about whether or not it also relates to transportation monies. And so I would actually like to speak to that point, if that's okay, Marcia.
Yeah, let's just see if Linda has a clarification or an additional point.
Can't understand her.
Linda, we can't understand you.
Okay, is this any better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was.
Well, no, I stopped. So Roger can clarify if he's got the statute or knows that on the transportation.
Well, Roger will speak in a minute. Did you have another point to make?
No, just that one. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Roger.
Well, I think we should just, I think I just wanted to make sure that this idea that we can talk about this idea more tomorrow, right? Because it sounds like the way that you're structuring the meetings is the public has more time or is available to respond and talk about this. And then tomorrow, like the board can take the appropriate action, having the benefit of public feedback, presumably. So I think tomorrow I just want to say agenda with the removal of agenda item 6, and we have to come up with a plan, and that plan has to be satisfactory to the motion that we did finally make around the composition. This idea that it needs to follow something as prescriptive of this form is not necessarily my reading a statute. So nonetheless, we will have that robust discussion
for tomorrow night's meeting. There has been a draft.
Question, I believe. Also say in terms of timeline, given that this was the contract talks about when the reappraisal will be completed. But I think in terms of the school's budget and their interests in how the CLA relates to their budgeting, it will take a while for the reappraisal. So to the extent that this solves any of their budget woes, I would say keep looking elsewhere in that budget because, it is. So I will just say, I wanted to make the 2 points. One, reappraisal, the timeline for the reappraisal will take a while, even if we move forward with this firm, and the people should know that. And I don't necessarily think that the signing of this form is the compliance. We need the Department of Taxation or whatever the sub-agency of that agency has to approve whatever our plan is. And so, and regardless if we don't have a town manager, we can't be under contract with anyone. So we will just need to update them of our plan.
Straighten it out.
And we have been responsive.
Okay.
When we received the order to reappraise in July, we have been
not for
responsive,
pulling, but
and we've been
just
responsive.
noting
The listers
some of the
have been
correspondence.
responsive
Arlene
for some time
Rotman
as well. So I want to make sure that responsive people know that the town of Norwich, its board, its listers
contract that they have any problem.
Did we get
coming up with a plan?
Panel. Thank you, Roger. There is a memo. I did read the 308, and it's pretty clear. You check the box. There's either a contract already submitted or a contract submitted with it. And that's correspondence. I just know from experience that agencies are going to act as agencies are going to act. I'm not pulling it. I'm just maybe that. So if you want to vote on interpretation of statute is a little different. But I do know that we as a board don't want to be responsible for not having school funding. So I'm taking that warning seriously, and I think it will be as it will be, but I think we need to own it if we don't get it signed. All right, and to your point, Roger, about how I'm doing this, each time we have a meeting and each time we have a particular section like action items or information items, that's supposed to focus discussion and comments. And so there may be comments tomorrow, but we will have prefaced all of this today. So hopefully we can move on.
Neil O'Dell has his hand up also.
Oh, thank you.
Pam Smith.
Okay. I need you to do that for me, Rob. I really am not seeing it all. Okay, Neil O'Dell.
Thanks, Marcia. So I just wanted to point out the school board is fully aware that the reappraisal process takes quite a while, and it's not something that's going to affect the budget that we're currently building right now for the next fiscal year. Our primary concern is that, budget monies that have already been approved by the electorate, by the voters, would be withheld from the town if we don't submit the reappraisal plan. So I guess our interpretation of statute's a little bit different than some of those on the select board. And I guess I would encourage you not to take it lightly. I think the date matters, and I think having a signed contract to be able to attach to the form matters as well too.
Thank you, Neil. And I understand Pam Smith has her hand up. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Pam Smith as a lister. The listers have been in touch with our district advisor on the question of submitting the RA 308. And the word we got back was that the 308 should be accompanied by a contract. They don't want them submitted separately. So I don't know what we're talking about in terms of interpreting statute, but I think we have to go with the guidance we get from PVNR, which is the 308 comes with a contract.
Okay. Thank you, Pam.
You're welcome.
Any other comments? Mary?
Just, if it's me, not another Mary.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's any answer for Linda Cook's question, which is about transportation funds. I've not heard that they would be tied up by this. I don't have an answer, but no one else said it's just not.
The statute lists that as well as education funds. And then there's a third set of funds that they would also withhold, which I can look up. But I remember it was 3 things.
Okay, thank you.
Cheryl Lindbergh, you have a comment?
I was just going to say what it is. The state shall withhold the education, transportation, and other funds from the municipality until the director certifies that the town has carried out that plan. That's the mandate wording.
Thank you, Cheryl. Okay, if we adequately set the stage for that discussion, we'll have it again tomorrow. Now we're moving on to the action items, and the first one is the Dan and Whit's charging station contract renewal. That contract is to expire tomorrow, and the new contract has some changes which I don't fully understand. So if anybody else does, I would like to hear from someone. But in any event, it will also need to be signed by a town manager, I believe. And so I think what we need to do is just sort of, for any of these things that are stacking up that need attention of a town manager, if we can sort of move the needle along by looking at them and deciding that we as a board approve them, then we're a little bit ahead of the game. So the town manager just has a stack of things to do. So the other thing that we are going to be looking at tonight is the town manager search RFP issue. And it didn't make it into the packet today, but I'm proposing that a memo that I put together based on information from Mary Gorman, which was just fantastic, be included in the packet tomorrow, if the board would like to discuss that tonight. And then I'd like to just have a little discussion about ARPA funds, because we are coming up to deadlines, and I want to make sure that we all understand where we're headed with that and creating a fund administrator, etc. I have some good news about select board minutes, which Mary will love. And that is all that I have to do for introductions at the moment. Does anyone in the audience have any comments that they want to make about any of those things that I just mentioned? And after that, we will go to the board. So I'm opening it up for any public comments about those items. I don't see any. Do you, Rob?
Oh,
Okay, good. Okay, so shall we start with the Dan and Whit's charging station contract renewal? So would someone like to speak to this? I'm looking hopefully at Aaron or Rob. There are some changes that are in here. You can see on page 19 of the packet, the current warranty expires on December 7th. The billing stuff, if you look on page 20 of the packet, that's been sort of crossed out, the flex billing. And then in Article 4 on page 21, there's been a lot of changes. So does anyone have any opinion about any of those things and the changes that are proposed for the next contract?
not me.
Does it make sense to you? Aaron?
I don't have specific comments. It does make sense to me. This Dan has taken over most of the cost of this managing the station, which we originally paid for with a grant or through a grant or something along those lines. I'm sure we can get more information from possibly Linda Gray, who was here, if she has her hand up so she could speak to it. But if you have anyone has any specific concerns, that might be good to mention them so that we can know what to respond to. Otherwise, it's, I think, fairly minor changes to a contract that we're not, that we have to agree to, but we're not actually paying for, I believe.
Right.
Well, in the 4.2 invoices, the town's forwarding the invoice to Dan and Whit for reimbursement. So are we paying for something in the first instance and then getting reimbursed? I'm just wondering, what's the town's, obligation? But Linda Gray, can you speak to this and tell us what you know?
Yes, thank you. Let me know if my audio gets weird and I'll make a little switch. Is it fine?
No,
It's
you're
weird.
echoing.
Okay, I hope it's okay now.
That's good.
Thank you. And I just want to note that the draft contract is simply a version meant to switch gears to be second year of the contract, as opposed to details that were laid out for the first year of doing it. So pretty much it's meant to be just cleaning up the contract that was signed last year and make it appropriate and relevant for 2022. And I believe that yes, the mechanism of payment is in fact that the town goes ahead and makes a payment, and Danowitz is paying the town so that it turns out to be a wash for the town. But the mechanism is as you described.
Okay, thank you very much, Linda. Does anybody have any other concerns or comments about this contract? Roger?
I have no concerns about the contract, but I guess my question is more, so I don't know if you want to move on, but I guess my only question is just, do we want to contact Voltrek to avoid a lapse in coverage to let them know that we can't authorize a renewal agreement by the 7th?
Yeah, I mean, I think if they mean it really does lapse and they're going to have something, or we renegotiate that, they probably need to know that.
Right, got to come up with a plan, as they say in statute.
Right, so do we want to do something like make a motion to approve this pending confirmation from Voltrek that the actual new date is going to be effective when there's an interim town manager?
I mean, I'm willing to make a motion for someone to communicate with Voltrek to say that we don't want to avoid a lapse in coverage, and explain our situation. But I don't think that we need to authorize an approval of this agreement because it's a contract that a town manager oversees.
Well, last year, I think we did vote to approve it, and then the town manager went ahead and executed it.
Well, I can say that we voted to affirm the decision of the town manager. And the reason why I chose that as chair is because there was a lot of public pressure. And Marcia, you provided some pressure to have a conversation and to approve it, even though it wasn't our prerogative to do so. So that's why the language is to affirm the decision of the town manager, which hopefully a year later we realize is redundant and not necessary.
Well, except that I'm not sure what's going to be actually in, I'm not sure that an interim town manager is going, I think we need to do more to direct an interim town manager than we might have done for a town manager.
Okay.
So to that extent, Roger, would you like to make a motion that covers our approval of this for ratification or execution by an interim town manager?
Sure. So I move to approve the agreement as presented in the packet for ratification by a future interim town manager. The agreement with Voltrek, I'll say.
What did you say at the end?
I was just clarifying the agreement and who the agreement was with. Sorry.
Okay. Rob seconds it. And just for discussion, do we need to add to that friendly amendment that somebody will be contacting Voltrek to make sure that's okay? Because we've got this December 7th deadline.
Okay.
Aaron?
I don't think that's necessary. The motion is as in the packet. If it changes, we will have to revisit it. But if they don't change it, then we can affirm it. So we don't really have to get with them to verify that it won't change. If they change it, then we have to talk about it again. That would be the case anyway. I think you can just move ahead with this.
Okay,
So,
we'll find. Mary?
I have some just clarification of how it would read. I mean, if it's an agreement as stated in the packet, should that be in the motion? So it's clear that it's this iteration.
Here. So, okay, hold on. I freelance this rather than, okay. Do you want me to repeat motion as it, so I moved to approve the agreement with Voltrek.
Back what you wrote, what you said.
Yes, so I moved to approve an agreement with Voltrac as presented in the packet for a ratification by an interim town manager, a future interim town manager was what I said. I'm sure that motion can be improved.
Okay, I got it.
And I seconded.
Yep.
Yes, you did.
Okay. I just wanted the piece about the packet. Thank you for repeating that. It's helpful.
I mean, and technically it should really say, I mean, also Jeff Martin has provided a helpful memo, which we should have all referenced. So I should have probably authorized a 1-year agreement and warranty plan, but I digress. The motion is the motion. It's sufficient. But
it is the agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay.
We still have to vote.
Can we call the question? All in favor? Unanimous. Now, I'm seeing on my screen a little notice that says a participant has enabled closed captioning. And then it says, who can see this transcript recording on? Does anybody else see that?
Yes, I see it.
Does anybody know what that means?
At one point, we had a member of the public request closed captioning. There's no reason given, but they requested.
Mary?
My mother uses that because she's a little hard of hearing.
Okay.
So it might be for that reason.
Okay. That's a nice thing then. All right, moving on. The next thing is a town manager search request for proposals. So Mary Gorman very kindly volunteered her time, did a web search, and annotated that search with basically, the benefit of her deep understanding of the area of recruitment, and essentially came up with 5 different firms that could be contacted with questions that might be posed to firms in general if we were going to be doing an RFP. So I guess just to, again, move ahead with this, which is going to be an inevitable search, just wanted to find out if the board wanted to start drafting an RFP, if they wanted to do any further investigation of these particular firms, looking for some direction from the board. Anyone? Rob?
So I think drafting an RFP, starting that work is important. I think remaining open to other possible firms is wise, but I'm very grateful for the assistance and the input from the public in this area. It was a very useful, we've had a couple of very useful suggestions.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Anyone else?
Well,
Roger?
just to be clear, 3 of them were known to us already, and one of which we've used in the past, and one of which Hanover used. So, but nonetheless, yes, it's helpful to have 2 more. So I think if not a formal RFP, right, I think it would be helpful to assist a future interim town manager who to provide sort of a 1-pager of what we would to be able to provide to firms. I think we talked about this last time. And otherwise, the only other discussion point is allocating funds in the budget. So I think town manager searches have come out of professional services in the past. And so a search. So I think it would be helpful to know more about, even if these are adjusted for so-called small municipality, what is the projected cost, so we can budget for it. And then similar, but maybe we don't. Yes, so I would say that. So if we see this going into the next fiscal year, we would need to either we need to know how much it'll cost so we can plan with this year's funds because it's unanticipated, or we would need to think about next year's funds. So I think the 2 most immediate things is getting a 1-pager to assist in a larger RFP process, and also figuring out the cost. I had assumed it would. I mean, I think like advertising alone could, if you separate some of it out, advertising package alone could cost a couple $1,000s, right?
I don't know. I thought this was an affirming kind of thing because, as you say, some of them were known to us, but it's affirming to know that somebody with this experience identified those. So based on that, do you want me to start doing some sort of a one-page draft? Does someone else want to volunteer to do that? Do you want someone to start calling these places and getting some initial, feedback? I don't know if cold calls are the way to go or if it's better to do a request. So I just want the board's opinion about how to start, because I guess we shouldn't be just sitting back waiting. We need to be doing something in anticipation of the greater need. Mary?
Still not clear in my own mind the difference between how we would approach this if we go with a national firm versus local. Just in terms of what kind of candidate do we want? Why do we feel the need to go outside of New England? Why is it a really good idea to consider, a national pool? I mean, it could be just there are many more candidates nationally, but I would just like to be a little more clear on how that could be beneficial to this process. I guess Hanover went in that direction. I think they sound pretty happy with the person they come up with. I mean, maybe if Roger doesn't mind speaking to that a little bit, I'd like to hear.
Roger?
So yes, to Mary's point, I think we can discuss what kind of strategy, like what strategies, what competencies of a firm, right? If they want to have a national scope or a regional scope, I think that's helpful. I think it would probably, maybe even just thinking about, something like a description of the position, a description of priorities, a description of what the successful candidate might be, the qualifications, their preferred qualifications or minimum qualifications, maybe about the town of Norwich, like how would you represent your community to a potential candidate or firm, and then compensation and benefits. What are we willing to offer? So I think if we want to sort of table, or if we don't want to maybe get stuck on how to talk about the process, which is tempting and might need some work, but maybe we should just begin with some of the categories that I just outlined, right? And then maybe use that as a basis of a one-pager for a firm. But I do think we need to commit to that. So maybe just take a different approach rather than think of the question firm, just think of the question of like the candidate, and then ask a firm to find that candidate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think once we've determined the candidate, what it looks like in our mind, then we have to say to the firm, so how do we get this, right? How would you go about getting this? And what's your fee structure? And, the things that I alluded to that Mary brought up, there's some nuances there. So let's start with putting together a picture of the person that we're looking for. And if someone wants to start that, we could pass it around, put it in for another meeting, and people can slice and dice it and add to it. And so we can sort of get that. And in the meantime, do you want me to try and find out more about structures, or do you think that's too early? Or I could ask Mary if she thinks that's too early. Structures for rates and processes, etc. Aaron?
Well, so the way I'm imagining it at where we're at right now is we put together some sort of as Roger says, a one pager that describes the candidate and what we think the process might look like and the timeline, that sort of thing. But use that to inform an RFP and then select a firm. But we're ahead of ourselves if we're looking at looking at the firms already. We have to have an RFP before we. I mean, I'm assuming we would have an RFP before we, or an RFQ before we have a firm in mind. So, I would say let's keep it in order, unless we're just going to pick a firm out of a hat and not do an RFP, which we could probably do if our policy allows it. But I'm good with an RFQ or an RFP if that's the way we want to go.
Well, I think everybody sounds like they're agreed on first structuring what we're looking for. But I sort of look at this like you can probably go to a lot of restaurants and ask them, what do you serve in the line of Italian food? I don't know. And then see how do they respond? How would they work for us to get this picture of a person that we want for this kind of a town? Because it's almost how can you serve us best? And what would that cost us? Right. So
yeah, that's an RFQ.
Right. So what we're going to do is start out with that picture. And so my question is, who wants to start drafting that picture? And then we can all work on it. No takers? I can do it myself, and then I'll pass it to all of you. Okay? One picture coming up.
Thanks, Marcia.
You're welcome. Right. Now, the numbers have all been changed, but the ARPA funds.
You have a hand up, at least one hand up, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm having a terrible time with the hands. Charlotte Metcalf?
Hi. Thank you for recognizing me. Maybe this is insane, and it's not something I've thought about before, but we've had some difficulties keeping our employees happy. And I'm wondering if just in the preliminary stage, we couldn't ask our loyal employees to talk about the town and what they are looking for from us in a town manager themselves. When I first moved to Norwich, we didn't have a town manager system. And somehow the board and the employees work things out. So it's just a thought.
That's a good thought, Charlotte. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
As I'm drawing my picture, I will draw on the people who work for the town.
Thank you.
Any other comments before we move on to the next section, which is equally oblique? ARPA funds.
Linda Cook raised her hand.
Oh, gosh, thank you. I'm going to just have to ask you, Rob. Linda Cook, please.
It just happened.
Okay. Go ahead, Rob. Linda. You're on mute.
Star 6.
Star 6, Linda.
I thought I
Good.
Okay. I think also it'd be good to get the impression from the community members as well. Let's because they're both people's vision and see what happens.
Okay.
Marcia, we conducted a survey to address that concern too recently. And so Miranda should be able to provide you some of that raw data.
Okay.
I also will say that Claudette offered a report on that because I think she was the point person for it, so that I can point out where that was in a past meeting, so you'd have the benefit of that.
That would be good.
I think she sent it I think it was in a packet actually, or sent it to us separately and then put it in a packet.
All right. Let me just say, anybody listening can send me whatever they want, and I will try and fold it into the picture. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other hands? Nope. Okay. Now shall we talk about ARPA funds? So I think, not putting you on the spot, Rob, but didn't you go recently or participate within the last year in some sort of an ARPA discussion? And so if you have anything that you want to add about this, but basically, I know deadlines are coming up. I know that initially we had some funds that were maybe tagged with the town manager's name as either a contact or something. So do you remember that?
What the meeting that I recall attending was on just financial matters from the standpoint of a select board, and ARPA was mentioned in passing, not in any detail, as I recall.
Okay. All right. I do seem to remember that there was some sort of a contact name on there, and so I didn't want to forget that. And I also wanted to talk about, if we needed to set up a fund, that should probably be something that once we have an interim town manager, we should start looking at that pretty closely, because we want to make sure that we don't miss any deadlines for making decisions, or even, I hate to say it, encumbering those funds. But I wanted to put it on your radar. And, again, if anybody has some ideas about how we want to tackle this, if somebody wants to be a point person, I just think we need to keep it in front of our faces. Any comments? Roger.
So I think a couple of things. So like in terms of the, there was a portal, right? We were required to designate someone when these funds were received. We had designated Herb. Rod spent a better part of a Saturday, I remember he mentioning, working with the tech support to, get himself named as the contact for that.
I remember that.
I think it was more work than you would expect, but it was the federal government. And so I think we would need to ensure that a new name is on that portal. We can ask Rod as part of the terms of the severance agreement. We can ask him that follow-up if that was done. So that's maybe one of the administrative questions you were getting at. And I think otherwise, we took the deduction that that sort of washed ourselves of a lot of these federal reporting requirements. But it has been recommended that we nonetheless create a reserve fund for it for better tracking of these funds. But I think otherwise, because I think the public expects some kind of process for the ARPA funds. But I mean, I think there's more than enough capital projects to allocate those funds to. I think also it's not that much money, and by the time Tracy Hall comes together as a discrete package, the decision will be obvious.
Well, as long as we're not going to miss any deadlines, and I think I'll just look up the deadlines and see what I can learn. And in the meantime, Aaron, as the conduit with Rod, would you please just find out about what's going on or what went on with that portal and the name?
Sure.
You can find out about that.
Okay. So, and this is some federal portal specific.
Yep.
Okay.
You'll remember it.
I'll ask about it. I'm sure he will.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Are there any other concerns about the ARPA funds at the moment? None? Okay. I'm just the worrier.
Linda Cook has her hand.
Thank you, Rob. Linda Cook? *6.
Okay. Several things. The time that Herb was doing it at one point, he was using Pathways employee to keep up with the portal. So I don't know if you check on which project that was. I don't remember, but I know there was an employee that kept the town straight on that and going forward. Also, Two Rivers did a presentation to the town in April, and I'm trying to think what year. It's not that long ago on the ARPA funds.
Mm-hmm.
So we may want to take a look at that again.
Yeah, that's a good point, Linda. I think there have been some amendments since then. So that's
There
what I want.
I'm not even sure, sorry, Marcia, if the final decisions have all been made and come out yet. I know I checked it once, but they weren't all done then. So to see if everything's been decided.
Thank you. Matt? Matt Sweat?
Hi, you asked about, I believe if I understood
Matt?
the records correctly.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We're slipping on our identifying address.
Pardon. Matt Sweat, Old Orchard Lane, Norwich. And I believe if I read the designated fund records correctly, there's already a designated fund for ARPA, and it's got about $1 million plus in it. And you asked about deadlines, and the main deadlines, from what I understand from reading a bunch of the documents, that the main deadlines are the costs. You can spend it on costs incurred on or after March 3rd, 2021, and then further costs must be obligated by December 31st, 2024. So that's sort of your window of opportunity for committing spending. And then they have to be expended by December 31st, 2026. So those are the main deadlines.
But the work that we did under the advice, sorry, Marcia, the work that we did under the advice of TRC or others is that we have washed ourselves of those obligations, right? It would so I think to Linda's point, like we just should remind ourselves of where we last were. And, I think we talked about this. We talked about whether or not the budget process in and of itself was a sufficient public engagement process to commit so-called ARPA funds to expenditures, right? So I think, these dates, I don't even think are necessarily relevant because of the deduction, the elections that we chose to do. So I think we should just refresh our memory from the past work that we've done.
I think that's a good thing, because we don't want to miss if Matt's right. So Aaron, can you just add to your discussion with Rod, exactly what it is that we elected and how much he remembers, and maybe
I will try to inform myself through him as best he remembers, and I'll report back.
Having worked with federal portals for many, many years, I always took pictures, screenshots of things when I finished them. And so if there's a handy screenshot in the file, I'd love to see it.
Linda has raised her hand again.
Linda Cook.
She's unmuted already.
Thank you. Go ahead, Linda Cook.
Thank you, Rob. The other thing is finding time to give the public time to digest the information and input into what projects or what direction. It sounds like that the decision has been made to go with Tracy Hall, but have we had public input on that at all yet?
No, Linda, we haven't. So to be continued.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, any more discussion on the ARPA? Good. So now select board minutes. I can happily report that the advertisement on Indeed garnered us somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 applications. And so that made Mary's night. So what I did was ask Miranda to please go through those applications and give us a short list. And we will have that for our packet on the 14th of December. And all of the candidates will have some identifier, like a number, and the board can proceed. Is that satisfactory to the board? Hearing no wild objections, I will go forth. Okay. Any other comments? Linda, your hand is still up. Is it just?
I'll lower it. It's lowered.
Okay, good. All right, we are now in discussion items. And again, no motions are anticipated on critical issues which might be discussed. They're just being framed for future action. And so the one tonight is I put on the human resources support. That's something that going forward, the board is committed to doing something in terms of support for staff. And the question is how we would proceed and what that would look like, whether it would be an FTE position that we have going forward, or whether it would be consultants or what. So prior to the board starting a discussion, does anyone in the public have any comment about human resources support for the town of Norwich? Stuart Richards.
Stuart Richards, 82 Elm Street. Thanks for recognizing me. So I'm very unclear on why HR Happens was terminated, or why they resigned, or why they didn't continue their work. One of the important parts of what they were supposed to do, as they proposed, was to find ways to make things work more smoothly in the town. And so if you're going to think about how to make things work more smoothly, it seems to me that since HR Happens has already started their work and did quite a bit of work for which they billed us, that they be considered. And an explanation of why they are not still working to try and accomplish what they proposed would be very helpful, I think, for the public to understand. It just is, I'm sure there are reasons why they are not still working. They did not complete their work. And I certainly, as one member of the public, would very much like to know why they are not still engaged in doing what they started to do. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Stuart. I think that the board is going to have to look at this afresh, and that's what we'll be doing. And so just starting from that fresh point, one of the things that I had been thinking about was, we've never had an assistant town manager. And maybe it would be a good thing to have that position, which also had other responsibilities such as human resources support. That does not mean that person would necessarily be able, I can't think of anything in particular at this moment. Nobody's a miracle one size fits all sort of person for every job, but certainly that function needs to happen. And whether it would be most effective for our town to have a full-time person who's doing that work and stays here and is invested and understands Norwich versus somebody that comes in and does some work as a consultant basis and then is gone. I think that's the thing that we need to sort of decide as we're going forward. And concomitantly, I think we also need to be thinking about the structure that is going to be put together as we go forward in terms of better understanding what each job does, be it staff or elected officials, and how that all intermarries with an overarching personnel policy, which whoever is hired as a consultant or an FTE person coming in to do a job would then be monitoring so that we would have a much smoother operation. So those are the kinds of things that I'm thinking about. And I'm wondering, we're going into a new phase. We're sort of stepping into it slowly, but there'll be presumably an interim, then there'll be a full-time town manager at some point. And we want to be building a solid structure as we move forward. So I'm interested to hear what the board thinks we should be doing in preparation for creating that solid structure, which will be Norwich. Mary?
I I tend to agree. I like the idea of having an ongoing person. I don't know if we're ready to take that step to hire. I would love to see an assistant town manager, but it's a big step. And last time we talked about it, which is fairly recently, I think we identified sort of three major roles. One was supporting it, just the general administration. Another was HR. And a third was communication and IT. And they're all very time consuming. I think it might still be worthwhile to have a focused consultant to help with situations such as, especially in a time of high turnover of employees, how do you create sort of a good integration of the new employee with the people who are here? You know, if we had a specialist in that, maybe that would help us a little bit. How do we have sort of a smooth landing? How do we ensure that employees who are already here, feel like the new person is part of the team, that it's all going to knit together as a positive force. So, if there is such a consultant, that might be less expensive. It might answer some of our questions at this point. So I could see it working from that point of view.
Thank you, Mary. Aaron?
I'm just thinking a little bit about the timing of this. I don't see how we can really do anything when we're hopefully about to hire an interim town manager. I would say we should be talking about this maybe in the context of integrating a new permanent town manager. At that point, I would think that some sort of trainings and consultancy, to help us help this new town manager build a strong team throughout the town would make sense. But to try and do it with an interim, at a disrupted time, that just seems like a recipe for disaster to me. So I think let's put this on a slightly longer term trajectory. And if we're going to look for a firm or look for a consultant, look for them in the time frame of a new permanent town manager.
So would you be suggesting that we be budgeting for this for not next year, but the following year?
Well, I mean, we're talking about a new permanent town manager in the beginning of the next calendar year. It's coming calendar year, which is in this coming budget year. So I would say this coming budget year, not the year we're in, which ends in the middle. Well, we could scrounge for funds to maybe get a proposal if that costs anything to do some sort of initial idea out of this year's budget if we felt like that was something to make sense. But the timing, I'm just saying not now, but something coming, I don't know what the timing exactly would be, but in the early months of a new permanent town manager. How that works budget wise, I don't know.
Roger?
So I think, yes, we need to budget for it for the FY24 fiscal year. Whether it is a series of a consultant or a series of consultants, or one consultant who does a series of workshops, or else an actual A-line position, I think that needs to be decided. I don't know if the intention of this conversation is to move towards that decision, but I think absolutely. I think in the meantime, there are legitimate workplace disagreements that exist. I think the board is aware of those legitimate workplace disagreements that exist. I think it is our responsibility at this point to document them to ourselves, come to a consensus in a way that honors the privacy of all folks, and then begin to do the work to resolve them. Because some of the problems are structural, and no person in a town manager role will be successful until these structural problems are resolved. So I would propose that, yes, we need a long-term collaborative work that needs to be budgeted for, absolutely. But I think in the meantime, we really need to come to a consensus, share a provisional set of reality together as a group about what the actual workplace disagreements are, and then talk about that we want them resolved, and then seek whatever process is necessary to get that resolution, whether it be mediation or otherwise. So I feel really strongly that an interim solution we have to own and really work towards, because a gesture of Mary going to a meeting to have some conversations needs to have some follow-up, right? Like that's all. That's just where we are.
And I think I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think that one of the problems that leads to disagreements and uncertainty about who's doing what is that there is no common understanding about what jobs are supposed to be done by whom. And I think that a good starting place would be, basically job descriptions and understanding the flow. So I've been putting that together because I feel confused, and I'm thinking any new board member that comes on in March could be confused, new town managers, new anybody. And I think once we have these understandings about the upstream, downstream flow of work, who's responsible for what work, that then gives you a mechanism for people to discuss what they find a disagreement about. And I think it then salts down much more quickly, because if you have factual evidence, this is the job and this is what has to be done either by statute or this is how we've always done it, but gosh, maybe we need to think about whether that works. I think that shortens the conversation and lays the groundwork for a really effective personnel policy to overlay that. So I'd like to start with that, and I will share soon what I've been putting together so that you all can think about it, and then we can move forward. And I think however we want to do it, if we start to think fiscal year 24 budget has to have some money in it for something, that would be important, whether it's, just we start seeding some money so that we have some money for a consultant to come in once we've got things laid out the way we think they should be, or whatever. But I think we do need to start thinking about salting away some money in this budget. Does that make sense to anybody? Rob?
Yeah. One thing that the discussion in general here has got me uncomfortable with is anything that usurps the responsibilities of the town manager himself or herself. That if we are going about setting job descriptions on our own, we're treading on their territory somewhat, and that makes me nervous. So,
well, I understand that. What I was thinking was more like this job writes these checks, or files these papers, or whatever, and that is not necessarily something anybody can change if it's statutory or whatever. So I take your point, and that's not the intention. It's just, certain jobs do certain things because that's what they do. And I've found a lot of confusion just in the last 3 weeks that I've been sitting in the chair. I'm trying to figure out who does what when. And that's the kind of thing that I think would be helpful to any person. And that's also a good starting point for a new town manager to say, hey, you know what? That doesn't really make sense to me. Why don't we all talk about this kind of a change? And again, it's just a starting point. Roger, you had your hand up.
So I can appreciate the desire to talk about it in terms of roles and responsibilities and job descriptions. I can appreciate that temptation. It feels like a very technical fix, right? That feels achievable. But I think instead, what we have some problems with interactions, right? We have responsible with interactions and relationships. And I think I think it is important for this board to understand the problems of the interactions and the relationships, right? So we can begin to resolve them. And I think it is also tempting to think that this is a new phenomenon, but it was in the improvement plan, which was a public record of a former town manager as well. These are long-standing problems with relationships and interactions, and so we have to be respectful and protect people's privacies, right? But this board needs to, in executive session, perhaps as a place to begin, to identify the problems, what we're seeing as problems, the legitimate workplace disagreements, so we can be able to properly do this work. And that I think we really need to move on that and say and name what we want to see changed. And if there's not an agreement on how to do that, then we begin what that process is there. And I think that is separate to what you and Mary have successfully articulated about like long-term team building and onboarding and who does that. So I really think we need to begin. We need to begin.
Aaron.
Yeah, I think I agree with Roger that we have not sort of job description-y kind of problems. I think it's not that two people think, oh, I'm supposed to do that, and that causes a conflict. I think this is much sort of deeper and more personal than that, and more, as he says, relationships rather than just simple expectations. And yeah, I think the fixes are not easy. So, and I agree that they're structural. So I have absolutely no idea really what we're going to be able to do about it. But I do agree that we need to own it, because there's nobody else in the town, in town structure, who can fix this. The town manager, certainly an interim town manager, can't do it, and there is no other body. And if we don't do it and we continue to let it sort of sit, and we'll just continue to have these problems. So, and I think it's pretty hard to talk about it with any kind of respect for privacy and for personnel issues without doing it in executive session. So I think we're sort of stuck with scheduling some executive sessions to really try and get a handle on what we think the problems are and what we think we can do about them. I don't really see any way around that.
Well, I have to say I disagree with you, and I really feel that we should start with the technical stuff. It is not our prerogative to tell other people, especially co-equal branches of government, but also the employees of either those or the town manager, how to behave or what to do. I think we really need to start with the technical stuff and see if it resolves. If it doesn't resolve, I don't think it's the board's prerogative. I think that's when we need that consultant that Roger was talking about. Some entity that comes in absolutely neutral, talks to everybody, and we figure it out. But I think we'd just be chasing our tails if we tried to superimpose. Mary, you haven't had anything to say yet.
I'm just wondering how we would go into executive session. I mean, I think there's one about disciplining an employee, but our only employee is a town manager. So I'm not sure how we would do that. I might be wrong.
So,
Roger?
So I mean, I think but I think we can get some advice on how to do that if it's possible under the provisions. But I mean, I think what we need to do is we need to have a shared understanding of the legitimate workplace disagreements as a group, right? That in itself meets the burden to discuss that together as a group. Once we're able to do that, we can, begin to talk about a further analysis. And then, as I've always said, then we need to identify what expertise is needed for that. But I think this group needs to convene together and come to the same understanding of those workplace disagreements. And as Rob was saying, it's really not a prerogative to be writing job descriptions either, as I know that So I do think. Anyway, I feel like I've done the best to express what I think we need to do.
So, I understand. Rob,
members.
Something?
Yeah, we have two members of the public who have been waiting to speak. Yeah, Charlotte and Linda.
Okay, I just think I can't commit to that personally until we have more facts, and those facts for me would be each person, each board, that's us and everybody, putting down what they think their job is. And then we can see where's the problem. And if the problems aren't technical, that's where we need other help.
But Marcia, I think I think we're saying that this board doesn't necessarily think that that's the problem. We're saying structural, we're saying relationships. I haven't heard from Mary and Rob specifically with their analysis, but I'm saying on that basis, that needs to be discussed together. And then we can take, whatever the assistance is, whatever the expertise is to resolve some of the matters, we take it. But I'm not saying, I don't think that your analysis that you offered is the problem. I think that's all. I disagree. And I think Aaron disagrees. I don't know what Mary and Rob think.
Well, Mary made the point about the basis for the exception to the open meeting law, and I think she's right. Anything else, Mary?
Yeah, my it wasn't really to do with the open meeting law. It's just knowing how you would cite an executive session to deal with this. I think, months ago we were talking about getting in a neutral third party to deal with HR, human resources issues. And we did try to do that, and it kind of didn't go as we thought, but I think the need is still there. I mean, it's sort of like maybe in your family, if you had a kind of a complicated and knotty family relationship problem and it didn't seem to be resolving, perhaps you would go for family therapy. So I'm not sure we can solve it. I think there probably are certain roles and responsibilities that are not clear, that our personnel policy could be written more clearly. But I also think this human element is a very strong part of it, as Roger has said. I think that's an equally thorny part of it. And it's very unclear how we could go about sort of untangling this, it reminds me of a fishing line. It's all tangled up together. It's just unclear what exactly we can do.
Thank you.
I'm not going to name the problems as I see that. It would be inappropriate and make the town vulnerable if I were to name some of the breakdowns that I see, is what I'm saying. So, and in that basis alone, we need to come to an understanding together under privacy provisions as a group. And then I'm not saying that we in executive or in the public are going to solve anything. I'm saying the expertise that we consult would have to be an action, taken together. But I'm saying I am not comfortable articulating the problems that have been presented to us in the past and that I see and have analysis of in public. It would make the town deeply, deeply vulnerable.
Mary?
What if we tried to engage in a mediation process with parties that for whom we might have a disagreement about how to move forward? Because that would be a third party intervention. If it happened, everyone would have to agree to it. Everyone would get to say their side of the story to a mediator. And then we would come together as a group. It would all be confidential.
I appreciate that. I think that the mediator, if I were that person, would say, I want to see the background. I want to see what are the job descriptions, what are the personnel policies, and what are the problems. you need facts, you don't need emotions. So that's where I'm trying to go to. And even though it sounds technical, I think that's where people start off. Mary, you want to follow up?
Yes, I think I said mediator because I was talking about relationships and communication and feelings, not so much about the structural. So if that was something that we were interested in, I think that would be the nature of that intervention.
Okay, thank you. Aaron?
Yeah, I think I largely agree with Roger about this. We have talked about personnel policy. We've talked about master financial policy. Those are things that need revision that might address some very, some lack of clarity in certain job descriptions or roles and responsibilities. But I really don't think that's the problem we're talking about. The problem we are talking about is not a lack of clarity in roles. It's a longer standing relationship / emotional personality, whatever you want to call it, issue that that is just simply not tractable in the normal way. And we can't even talk about it because we're in public here. So how can we even get, as Roger says, on the same page about what we think about what's going on, and when we've had facts presented to us in executive session with lawyers and whatnot, and we know what we're talking about, and we know what the issues are, and we have to be able to talk about it with each other in a real way and come to some real conclusion about what we think we can actually do about it, or who we can ask to help us figure out what to do about it and then how to do it. But we can't do that in public. So because of various personnel reasons. So we simply have to, we either ignore it like Ford's have been doing, for the last 30, 40, 50 years, or as long as we've had a town manager form of government, or we try to deal with it. And to deal with it, we have to spend some time in private talking about it with each other so we understand what we're talking about and can be frank, which we can't do in public.
Well, I think everybody's made their position clear. I think my position is that it's beyond our jurisdiction, other than what I just laid out. So we're going to have to agree to disagree on that, and I don't know where we're going to go with it.
Whose jurisdiction is it? How do you address these things if the executive body of the town can't address them?
And we've gotten advice.
Whoa, guys, whoa, one at a time. Aaron, I recognize your question. And I'll just say to you, we have to remember we employ one employee, and we are co-equal branches of government with some of the other people, offices in town. So I think one of the things, if you want to do it, is get advice of counsel, and then we can go forward. But I don't think you should assume more jurisdictional power than we may have. Roger.
I was just going to interrupt to say that we have had the benefit of that review from council, right? We took public actions. I believe the date was September 14th, where we took 2 public actions in this, subsequent to that advice, right? This conversation was very much a follow-up to these public actions. And so, I'm just proposing the way to do phase 2. So I guess my own technical contribution, and apologies if that was in any way offensive, but my technical contribution would be, we meet in executive to begin to understand, so we can state the facts as we know them, right? So we can begin to understand, of what we need to do next for our community.
I think I just remember those discussions differently because I'm not sure. So I will review those. In the interim, let's take some public comment. Charlotte, your hand was first. Yeah. Oh, Rob, who was first?
Charlotte, yes.
Charlotte.
And then Linda.
Oh my goodness, my heart is pounding. I don't know where to begin. Except to say that in this whole conversation, and number one, I had pointed out earlier that we did not have a town manager when I came to Norwich, so it has not been 50 or more years where this has been a problem. I've heard the suggestion about having an assistant to the town manager, and I have not been clear about why that is a good idea, although I understand that Marcia is trying to delineate different positions in town. But I am concerned after recent events and relations that an assistant manager, like some of our other employees, would be cowed by the power of the town manager. And so I don't see that as an automatic solution. What I also have heard was a very good suggestion from Mary that we try to integrate people into the town, which means educating them. And my thought at the time she was speaking the first time was, again, we do have some loyal employees who have been here for 30 or more years and who could be helpful in that process, in working with the board and other people to educate a new town manager about some of the history and about town expectations from him. I do not think executive session is going to solve the employee relationship problems. I have to say that I have not been party to, of course, any of those sessions or what has gone on. However, in the past, I have been told by a current select board member that the town manager owes him because he is afraid of being let go. And so the town manager will do the things that he asks of him. I know that's a terrible indictment, but it is the truth. And I think that continuing in executive session is not going to solve your problems, our problems, the town's problems with the relationships between a town manager and employees. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Was Linda Cook is next. Star 9, 6.
Hello. Okay. I'm going to tell you something from the beginning to the end of this discussion. You haven't hit quite all the topics, but you've hit a lot of topics. And we went through this when we started with the Conroy study, which was setting up a pay scale. Bonnie will probably tell you some of the others that have been here. They had to write down everything they did so they knew what was going on. And it was very helpful for people to talk to each other about.
Point of order,
and they
Chair, can we get better audio?
Is this any better?
Just a minute. Mary Layton had a point of order.
Just could we get better audio so we can hear your ideas, Linda?
Oh, I'm sorry. Is this any better?
Yes.
I've turned it up a little more.
Okay.
Let's see if that helps without feedback. No, I love all the ideas that have come out. And you can pick any point to start with. And we went through this when I was on the board, and that's how the job description's getting written down, and you've got people that have been here for years that can tell you how much it's changed from when they wrote the last one. COVID-19 changed the way we work together. And who thought we would see many people working from home? So the coordination of all the communication has gotten a little bit trickier. And I think all of you with the ideas is, if you take, I don't know, I can't remember the contract with Condor's study, but it helped people do the job description, do the hours that are worked, do the pay scale, and that hasn't been updated for a while. It was written and then it's been pushed out, but maybe it's time to find them or someone else that could put this all together to give you a base of all the facts. And also with a new town manager coming in, that's a good time to integrate all of you working together toward a main project. And the policies will come behind that. So just an idea that having what do we want to call ourselves? Elected employees or employees here, have an outsider that's a great facilitator coming in and working with you, gets the process moving along and keeps it moving along. Just a thought that might be, and then bringing in the personnel part of it. I know I can't remember what the problem was, but I know it was talked about and the person had a great idea, but I can't remember what it was. So that maybe there is something out there through a facilitator or whatever the title of that person is, can hear everything and then put together steps in a program to get all of your ideas done. Because I think they're great.
Thank you, Linda.
Just a thought. You're welcome.
Stuart Richards.
Stuart Richards, 82 Elm Street. Thanks again for allowing me to speak. I think that there are elements that have been talked about by Marcia, by Roger, by Aaron, that are really correct. I know personally of situations where some employees feel like they have been abused by either elected officials or other employees. And knowing what job descriptions each employee should be fulfilling will certainly be helpful. Then you have also the personal problems that exist between people, bad chemistry or whatever you want to call it. And I do believe that having a facilitator, a mediator, somebody who steps in to try to be helpful to resolve some of these problems would assist in moving things in the right direction in conjunction with a new town manager, so that the town manager knows what kind of situation he's getting in. It just, where you have situations where some employees feel like they are, that their job is either undervalued or not appreciated or taken up by other employees or elected officials, where they are not allowed to do their jobs as they see it to be correct, is a prescription for a problem. So, and I think that all of these things, personal issues, can be worked out, can be improved. Even if they can't be worked out, they can be improved by having a facilitator, mediator, whatever you'd like to call that person. But knowing what each job should be, so that each person knows where they're supposed to be functioning and what they're supposed to be doing, is helpful. So, thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Susan Barrett. And can you state your name and your location?
Yes, thank you. I'll move over here. My name is Susan Barrett. I'm on New Boston Road in Norwich. Just a very brief comment. As someone who actually works for a board and runs a staff, I think it's really important to empower your town manager and to delegate and empower him or her. I've heard several times people saying it's a him. It actually could be a her as well. Then them, I should say. So I think that whatever, I understand you all have a role in running the town and making decisions, but I just think it's really important to have the ability to delegate that authority and empower that person. And back to your earlier point, Marcia, of the assistant town manager, I really like that idea. And I think as you all are recruiting and working with your contractors in looking for potential town manager contract employees, that there may be somebody you come across who could be an assistant at that point as well. I know you can't do all of this at once, but it is something that I think makes sense. It may be more attractive to a town manager knowing that there could be an assistant in the future. So those are my comments, and thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Susan. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a full discussion and I appreciate it. Let's table it for the moment. There's no action that we need to take at the moment, but it will come up again. Now, future agenda items. Again, what I have done is just put down some items that I'm thinking we need to start doing. For the 14th, I'm looking at budget presentations from the town clerk and the listers. God bless you.
Thank you.
More ongoing town manager search work. That may be when you all see the preliminary picture of a town manager that I've started to draw. Summarize, maybe we'll have the time to start thinking about, but I kind of doubt it. At some point we had talked about doing, I was actually going to do a summary of which of the master financial policies had been finalized and which were unfinished. I think that's a project that I know we've talked about having auditors help us with, but I think some of that we really need to look at ourselves in addition, on maybe first. And then, as I said, potentially more ongoing HR and interoffice collaborative work discussions. So, and we will have a short list of people to look at, we now know, for the minute takers for our board. Is there anything else that the board thinks that we should be looking at in the near or distant future that I haven't identified anywhere? Mary?
Well, at some point, we'll have been having these budget presentations, but we're going to have to get a handle on what the budget really is somehow. And I'm not a financial person, but we're going to have to come to grips with it. And we have had some ideas. We sort of basically said use last year as at least a template, but then we've had some ideas that we sort of said, okay, we'll set this aside, we'll set that aside, but we're going to have to actually make some decisions. So.
Absolutely. I agree. Roger.
I mean, I think to Mary's point, I think last year's budget was, well, God, it's such a different year. But what I liked, something that I liked that we did last year was we communicated very clearly our expectations for that bottom line, right? And so I think that provided a lot of directives for department heads as they went into their budget prep. I think this year we just have, their graciousness, when they show up with their budgets, and then, we give them feedback that they may or may not have had any awareness of, right? And I think we saw that, we've already seen that where we hadn't previously communicated our expectation, and so we were getting different kinds of proposals. So I guess the process is the process, and so that we're having, and thank you to sounds like our interim finance director is playing a key role in some coordination of documents. But nonetheless, I think to Mary's point, like we have to have moved to a sense of like what that bottom line is sooner rather than later. And in particular, like I would like to know, in the existing budget, if we were to assume the same budget of last year, what are the inevitable increases, the obligations that we know that we have. And if we're at something like a 4% increase already, or a 5% increase, 6% increase, that is really helpful information as we have these other conversations about new roles, new consultants. So to the extent that we're able to, I think we need that question kind of answered before we ask for work, right? This is ultimately work for the department head.
And thank God, the woman, Joyce Holbrook, who's here from Robert Half, she's been doing that, I believe. And I think we're going to see that because she's been talking to me about the different percentage increases for certain things, just like you're mentioning, Roger. So I'm expecting that we're going to see that soon. And, she's been working tirelessly, but I'm hoping that maybe by the 21st, we may have some more definitive stuff from her. The thing that's confusing me is I don't really understand how and we can't, obviously, we can't get into too many specifics, but we've got collective bargaining stuff, and how does that fit into the budget? When does that fit into the budget? Is it in time to fit into the budget? I don't know those questions, the answers to those questions.
Right. And I think anything that surrounding collective bargaining and its negotiations, it has to be done in executive, as you know.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering, is anything going to be ready for us to fold into this budget? Look, and I'm going to put together some sort of a better timeline. Joyce has been putting together timelines, but I'm worried about that. Is anybody else worried about that? Mary?
I'm not really worried about it, but we're not doing it early enough in the year that we will have concluded our negotiations. So there's not a lot you can say about it.
Okay. So
you might have to budget just based on this year, assuming that there's not a new agreement yet. And that might mean that depending on what happens, there might be, a deficit or something next year because of how it's set up. But I don't think you can make assumptions ahead of time with how it's going to come out.
Right.
Yeah. Aaron, I have something, but go ahead, Aaron.
Well, maybe I'm not totally following the process that we're undergoing, but it seems to me that we've already got budgets sent out to the departments with a preliminary suggested amount. We go through each presentation, then Joyce chews that all back into a preliminary budget. We don't know about collective bargaining, so we make a guess there. We either use last year's number, or last year's plus 7% or 3% or whatever Joyce suggests. And then we have a preliminary budget. And then we have all the special things that we've set aside, and we decide. We have a tax rate, we have specials, and we either say the tax rate is already too high, or we've got some room. And it doesn't seem to me, other than collective bargaining being late, so we're going to be guessing there, that the process is so complicated. It seems like we've got a fairly straightforward plan, and maybe I'm missing something.
Well, I think the part that's being missed is maybe when you're trying to fill new positions. And I don't want to get into any particular discussions about any particular department. But if you are trying to fill a position, and if you are saying that's not enough money to properly fill that position, and if that is beyond the scope of Joyce's ken, so that she doesn't understand, because she's looking at some, generic economic numbers, like this is how much this is predicted to go up and et cetera. But she doesn't necessarily understand the nuances of particular kinds of functions. How do we tell her to help us there?
Well, no, that's what
Roger. Aaron, let me, for protocol, I'll just call on you and you can just.
Okay, I'm sorry. it seems to me that that's what we're doing. She's putting in a number, giving it to the departments. They are looking at it and saying, I accept that number, or I need more. And then they're coming back to us, and we're reviewing that a little bit, and then giving it to Joyce to put into the preliminary. So that's the department's responsibility to respond to her numbers, aside from collective bargaining, which is obviously separate. And she's following our direction to basically use a kind of a cost of living increase as the preliminary number, but the departments can come back and say, no, I need more for that position. And then we're gonna put anything that we don't think is sort of fitting into a preliminary across the board, sort of staying as flat as we can side, like an assistant to the town manager is being put aside, along with a fifth position at the police department is being put aside. And tomorrow we will see that there's going to be I think it's a new, not to steal Chris's thunder, but possibly we're going to see there's a new mower that needs to be, that he's going to suggest, that we're going to either say, okay, that fits in the budget, or we're putting that aside. And at the end of the process, we're going to chew through those aside things and decide if any of them can be funded. I thought that's what we were doing.
So my question.
Oh, come on, guys, play by the rules, Roger.
So my question then, Marcia, is when do we expect to see the full picture? And really, that's Mary's question that I'm now repeating.
Yeah. My recollection is we were looking at about like the 21st, but okay. My mind today has been a little bit blown up. So
I think that's great. And so I think, the process that Aaron described is what we're doing. Yes. And so by the 21st, we'll be able to sort of see, the full scope. And then we'll really only have 1 week, 2 weeks after that in order to, to vote. I think it's really that first week of January. So.
Okay. So let me ask Mary a question based on, there was a question today that, I feel strongly for Joyce in the situation that she's in, because she came in cold. She doesn't have a town manager to work with, and she's trying to, get through this. So Mary, given the questions that you are aware of that she had today, do you think what Aaron and Roger are saying is going to be okay in terms of the budget purposes, and maybe not having any information concretely from the collective bargaining process?
Well, my question today may have been a miscommunication, but I think I had a perception that there might be an effort to restructure the greatest step chart in light of incentives that we had approved that were one-time only hiring incentives. And I don't think that was the intention of our hiring incentives. And we had actually to have those, like the retention bonuses, we had to okay that with the union first. So I don't think messing with anything that has to do with the grade and step is just like, electric fence, like just don't go there. But perhaps what Joyce was trying to do is just figure out, well, how do you account for that?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Do you need a separate line item for a retention bonus? So it may have been that, that was more her thinking, but I, got into a little bit of a panic thinking that she's being super diligent and perhaps getting into the grade and step, which is like, no, just please don't go anywhere near that.
Yeah.
So
I'll have a talk with her.
Also, I think I didn't want, I felt bad. I thought this is just not something that should be on the fly with email either. So, and it's the type of thing I think a town manager would be done normally. So I kind of backed out of it.
Okay.
All right.
So wait a second. So tomorrow I will have another conversation, confirm with her the understanding that the board has, and that we're looking at about the 21st to have those kinds of numbers that the board is expecting. And Roger, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just think we need to see a full document, and I don't. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the budget is a big deal for us.
Rob has his hand up.
I have one,
Sorry, Rob. Go ahead.
Yeah, a question that I have that I certainly don't have the expertise to answer is if there's a way to budget for what ifs when it comes to employee pay scales and so on. So what if are we able to budget for an assistant town manager up to a certain point and not have to use all that money that comes back, but we ask for it up front? Is there a way to roll in what might be additional salary expenses if collective to sort of cover our on the potential for collective bargaining to come up with a number in without sort of saying, oh, you're good until this, but making sure that the public is aware of what that's going to run into and how we pay for it.
Good thought, Roger.
So maybe I'll just be clear. And this is evidence of a need for a town manager and a town manager form of government, I think. So, so I think what I would like to know is the FY23 budget, right? The one that's ending in July, the one that we're in. I want to know, I want that budget increased by all of our required obligations. I want to know like that number, like the existing status quo, existing contractual agreements, existing bargaining agreements but then everything like that we know has to change inevitably year to year. So healthcare, and then like anticipate and then the work that Joyce has done with some of the expected inflation given materials. And then we can have, I think that's a real number to then know, right? That's all. And I don't, if it's a huge exercise, then I don't think we need to do that. And we can just revert to what Aaron had said that he thought we were doing, which is also excellent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's basically what she's doing.
Okay, good.
But I'll confirm that. Aaron?
I think that's exactly what she's sending out to the departments. So I think that's actually exactly what she's doing is our
Right.
obligations plus a percentage, somewhat titrated for different categories, like, a little different for staff than for materials. And then that's just where they're starting with. And so she has all that. So she hasn't given that to us, or maybe she has as a document that generated a tax rate, but so that last step hasn't been done with this hypothetical prototype budget. But after we go through all the departments, we will have a prototype budget that has been slightly modified by people's needs. And then we could come up with a tax rate and then we can go forward from there.
Yes.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, great. That's the last final clarity that I need. So thank you.
So if we had that from her on the 21st, maybe we could have that mega 50,000 foot view document for the 28th, or if it wasn't until January 11th, is that too late?
You can't let it sit. Sure.
Yeah, it's much too late.
Way too late.
28th.
The question is, when are we done seeing all the departments? Are we done on the 14th seeing all the departments?
Hold on. We've got on the 21st right now, we've got budget presentations by town committees. I'm just being careful, like does planning need money, that kind of thing. And then a pass on the whole budget. That's the plan.
Okay, so hopefully Joyce can bring to us the bulk of the department's actual proposed budgets with an actual calculation of a tax rate on the 21st, and then we have a shot at
right. And then
the plan.
Then the idea was that on the 28th we would look at any last budget issues, and then finalize it and send it to the reviewer for the town report on the 11th. That was the plan. And I think she talked about that with Miranda because they're intersecting. Mary?
Do we need to review the outside appropriations, especially organizations that have not applied or are asking for increases? We usually do that. And should that be next the 14th, or that's not a lot of notice to them?
No, but that's right. You and I talked about that at one point. So I will add that to the 14th. And I don't know how many new or changed ones we have. It might not be that big a deal, but remember I had found Miranda's deadline was in November for those. So that should be easily identified.
Right. And it won't be, I think, a huge amount of money, but I think it's good to stick to our process.
Right.
So the Norwich community nurse is one, and there might be another. So
for Aaron's benefit, if you don't know this, anybody who wants an appropriation goes, if it's brand new, they submit it to the town clerk.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. We had the form, and we had a proposed different form, and Miranda's doing it.
Yes.
And just to be clear, the agenda item will be the approval of the warrant because all of these things are on a warrant and they all are assigned article numbers. So you could say in that first week of January or whatever, to approve the warrant of, or and that would include all of the, the asks.
So Mary was suggesting that maybe we know who they are on the 14th, but you're okay with not knowing it until the 11th when we approve the warrant? Because don't they do a presentation or something at some point in the past, Mary?
I was suggesting it a little earlier just because they're asking for money.
Yeah.
Part of the budget.
Okay, so let's add them to the 14th. And Aaron?
Well, I mean, Joyce would have those numbers in our budget. I mean, they are asking for money and we have to approve them through a warrant, but we also have to budget them. So they're presumably in the budget. So we'll see them on the 21st, I would assume.
I don't know that she has them yet, but we will make sure she knows about that. And if they're asking for money, we'll ask them to come and talk to us about it on the 14th. And it's not much time, but they've obviously had to think about it. Roger?
I don't think we should do that. It will be impossible to get through. I think the policy has been that if they're asking for an increase, that they may be asked to come to a board meeting. But I will say that I don't require that this year. It's between them and the voters. I would like to know how much it's affecting our budget or the budget, but I don't need a presentation to know that. There's a form on file, presumably.
Well, I'll tell you what, at the very least, we should put them in the packet so that we can know what's there. So we'll put appropriations in the packet.
Sounds great. Thanks.
And those would be only new or changed.
Right.
Okay. And then if anybody thinks something needs further elucidation, we will ask them to come and elucidate. Yes,
and
Roger.
Marcia, have you invited? I can't imagine we've had a second to do, but the committees that receive money through the budgetary process, or the Energy Committee and the that commission, the Conservation Commission, and I think now I've heard some notes that my gosh, I don't know their names. Not the Trash Committee, the Solid Waste Committee. The Solid Waste Committee is also interested in making budgetary requests. So I don't know what this board requires of those committees for a presentation.
Well, I guess the first thing is they have to ask us and tell us what it's for. So that was on my list of to-dos, but I will do that this week. Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. And I guess is it unheard of for any committee to just say, we need funds for X?
It's not.
Yes, Mary.
I don't think it's unheard of. I don't remember sort of going through it methodically. I was actually surprised to learn that the Planning Commission has an advertising budget, for instance. So I don't know how that,
right, yeah,
happened or is administrative.
They don't.
They don't.
They don't. The Planning Commission is just using the line item of the planning department, which is another whole conversation. But they don't have a budget.
Well, I will be egalitarian and ask everybody if they're going to be asking for money. We need to know if they want any money. Okay.
Can't hurt.
Is there any other thing that we need to be thinking about for a future agenda item?
Oof.
Mary.
Well, at some point we're going to have to think about the warrant. And probably not at the last minute.
Okay.
Just any warrant articles. In the framework for putting that together.
Okay, I will start by talking to Miranda again about it. We did talk at one point about the timing and stuff and how much, getting it to the proofread, well, whatever we're doing, and then the town report, all of that kind of stuff. So I will get that and calendar it into our agendas. Anything else? Okay. Any final comments from the public? Linda Cook, is your hand just up? Star 6. I don't hear anything. So if that's it, do I hear a motion? Oh, there you are. Hi, Linda.
Hi there. I just got my speech and you missed it. I said, this was wonderful tonight. You're on a new road, energy, and the communication is going forward. I like the energy tonight and all the things and the process you've gone through. Wonderful. Keep it up.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Leslie Wells. Can you state your name and...
Hi, thank you. Leslie Wells, Willie Hill Road. Just a comment from something from last week. I watched the section of the new police chief from the last meeting, and I guess this relates to budget also, but it seems to me that the chief was hired in part to put a department together, and he kind of responded on short notice, as he's new, with good news. And it seemed to me that he sounded pretty confident that he can find experienced officers who, if paid appropriately, will be more likely to want to stay in the position over time. And that seems to be really good news. I was a little surprised to see that the board wasn't more behind that. I don't know exactly the details about the budget, but I think the voters approve on it one way or the other. But since the chief does have specifics, that there's a way to kind of respect his expertise and and include what he's proposing that's necessary to fill the department. And so that's one comment. Related, I did hear some select board members saying, want to do as little as possible because so much is going on. I can appreciate that, but that doesn't seem to be enough related to the police department because it's such a crisis situation and on its face. But it also seems like it's a crisis within the town and its citizens, and that one of the primary inspirations, say, for Stand Up for Norwich, which is kind of incredible that such an organization, and shocking from a governance point of view, that an organization like this would sprout up with so much energy and so much members. But one of the principal concerns was basic services, including safety and DPW. So it seems that it would behoove the select board to be responsive both to the police chief, but also what seems to be like a groundswell, within Norwich related to those public services, including the police department. And my final comment on that is that if it's true, and it could be wrong, that there is like a groundswell, to get those public services done, and the select board, the majority of the select board kind of opposes, efforts in that direction, even though there's good news, say, from the police chief and specifics, then it will kind of become this odd result of rule by minority. Because there does seem to be a lot of people in the town who are activated related to basic services. So I ask that, the board, maybe you are responsive to this, and I'm not at every meeting and I don't know everything, of course, but it was dismaying to see the response in the meeting last time to the chief. And I'm glad the chief is here. And I hope he is offered in a fulsome way, respect to his expertise. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Do not doubt that we are very glad that Chief Cochran is here. Manu, would you like to speak? Please.
Yes, Manu Tassone, Hawk Pine Road. I want to add, in the overall discussion of numbers and budget, I think it's easy to forget about the human cost and the human stress, the human component of the situation the town has been in the last 9 months, with a skeleton of a police force and almost no DPW. I personally received a lot of emails from people in town who are too afraid to speak up about their fear and of safety. Many residents in town don't show up clearly at the select board meetings and definitely do not post on the listserv. And they don't do that because they don't want to get attention. They don't want to call attention to the fact that they're alone, that live really far away from the center of town, and God forbid something happened, nobody can help them. And I received those messages. I received those calls. I had many conversations with our neighbors who have no one else to talk to about this because there was no police chief. And Anna was doing everything, Officer Ingraham was doing everything she could to keep things running. And it's easy for people to assume that if your house is not getting broken into, then things must be great. We don't need this kind of protection in Norwich because we live in this idyllic little town. And I can tell you that's not the case. And I wish I hadn't had to have those conversations with our neighbors, but I listened, and I'm here passing on the message. Do not assume that your perception of what's happening is the reality, because it's not. And so take a moment to focus, please, not just on inflationary numbers, not just what happened last year. Think about the well-being and the stress of our neighbors and the help that they are asking for from this select board as it decides whether it can rectify the mistakes of the past. So please support the police department request and assess really what is happening in town before you rush to rubber stamp an old budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Manu. That's very well said. Anyone else have any thoughts?
Leslie Wells.
Leslie Wells?
Hi, thanks. Just two quick comments, just because Manu started saying things that were kind of, very general. And I had two thoughts about this the other day. One is, I think it's easier just from an inertia point of view to keep something going than to change it or to let it degrade and then fix it. And Norwich probably isn't as safe as it was, X months ago or whenever there was the last full, department. But it's kind of before things really fall apart, it's probably easier to, get things back in order sooner so that it can regain that momentum of being a safe place. And this is kind of a hard thing to say, kind of a hard thing to hear, but, I've been listening to these meetings off and on for 6 months. And there's been a lot of information that's come out in terms of safety and what the, Vermont troopers, can and can't do, and what local towns can and can't do, and it's certainly been, widely, discussed, in local papers about our lack of coverage and that kind of thing. But if I were a select board member, I would take it gravely seriously that my decisions, impact the safety of my neighbors and people, just like me. And there's a fair amount of knowledge that you all have, that anyone who listens to these meetings have. And there's, one might say, and I have some background in, ministry, but there's a moral culpability, at this point, there's a fair amount known. And so not only are you as political leaders, but you're also citizens. And there's also a moral and ethical obligation, to keep the town safe. And there's a lot of information out there. And we now have a chief who's new and seems very capable and optimistic, and, give him a chance and allow the town to really, resume its status as a safe place, because that's getting degraded. But again, it's a grave, grave, grave responsibility that you all unfortunately have. And, I would take the ethical and moral implications of this very seriously, because it would be, if I were a select board member and, a lot of bad things happened, I'm not sure how I could look at myself, in the mirror as a human being either. So there's that, rather dramatic but fundamental aspect to this as well. We're talking about human beings, 3,500 people, in this town, and it's critical to keep it safe.
Thank you, Leslie. I can assure you that I personally think about that all the time. Aaron.
Did I go to a different meeting last time? Because it seems to me we accepted the chief's budget as he offered it, except for putting aside the question of a fifth officer, which we hadn't funded in the previous budgets as a special that we will discuss later. So I'm not quite sure why we're getting so much pushback that we're arguing the police chief when we just accepted his budget. As so far, for the moment. Does anyone else have a different memory than that?
I'm not sure that it came across that way, which is what you're hearing reflected. That's
Can we move on to the next agenda item, Marcia? Because I agree with Aaron, and we have a meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm just answering Aaron, that's all. So there are no future agenda items on the future agenda item. So would there be a motion to entertain for adjournment?
I move to adjourn.
Is there a second? Aaron seconds. All in favor? Unanimous. See you tomorrow, everyone. Good night.
Recording stopped.